latest audit, Working for a Living Wage, which is a thorough review of the City of Syracuse Living Wage Ordinance. This is the first audit of the Syracuse Living Wage Ordinance done since 2016. The Living Wage Ordinance was first proposed in Syracuse in 2002, at a time when former Governor George Pataki and state Senate Republicans were blocking increases in the state's minimum wage. Without the authority to implement a local minimum wage, cities throughout New York turned to living wage ordinances as an opportunity to help raise the floor for wages locally through their procurement process. The measure was eventually passed and signed into law in 2005 by former Mayor Matt Driscoll. The primary tenet of the law required that certain city vendors pay their employees at a higher rate than the minimum wage and guarantee those employees paid time off. The goal of the legislation was to ensure that employees of city contractors were being paid enough to live without government assistance. The law also created a Living Wage Advisory Committee and required the City of Syracuse to designate a department or agency to track compliance, take complaints, and publish an annual report. What our audit uncovered was a law which was designed to be complicated, had a limited reach, and was never fully enacted or executed. The legislation's carve-outs, exemptions, and exclusions, coupled with the city's complicated record-keeping systems, made it difficult to ascertain who was required to comply with the law. Ultimately, the audit found that these exemptions resulted in 0 companies that were required to comply that we could identify. The audit found that the Department of Finance determined the correct annual living wage rate, but did not make an attempt to publish these rates beyond their website and did not provide direct notification to contractors. The city also never designated a department or agency to track compliance, monitor complaints, or issue an annual compliance report. The Syracuse Living Wage Advisory Committee, which includes appointees from the Mayor, Common Council, and Greater Syracuse Labor Council, which joins us today, their head, Mark Spatafor, has not met or had the appointment since 2014. The Advisory Committee exists to ensure that complaints are heard and offer recommendations on how we can improve and strengthen the Living Wage Ordinance. Our audit makes several recommendations, including overhauling the law, starting with reconstituting the Living Wage Advisory Committee. I'm calling for eliminating all carve-outs of the law and ensuring that all city vendors are paying a fair living wage to their employees. Period. End of sentence. We also recommend designating the Office of Management and Budget, which oversees the Division of Purchase, to track compliance, receive and investigate complaints, and file an annual report with the Common Council. I am also recommending the Common Council hold an annual meeting to review that report publicly. The audit also recommends redefining the living wage formula, which was constituted in the early 2000s, made a lot of sense at the time, but there's a better way to do it now. There is a calculation developed by the United Way, pioneered by the United Way of Northern New Jersey. It's known as ALICE, Asset Limited Income Constrained Employee. This takes into account the cost of childcare, cell phone and internet bills, and other modern necessities that were not factored into the formula 20 years ago when the law was passed, and would result in setting the living wage at an even higher level. Additionally, we found that not all city employees are paid the current living wage rates. This largely reflects some of our part-time employees to whom health care is not offered as a benefit. I'm calling on the Common Council to pass a law extending a living wage rate to all city employees. The living wage ordinance is not good enough right now. Something mediocre is not better than nothing. We are one of the poorest cities in the nation. The people of Syracuse deserve and demand that their tax dollars are not further subsidizing poverty, but being used to uplift our neighbors most in need. Investing the time and energy into a revitalized living wage ordinance will make a difference in the difficult road to eradicating poverty in the city of Syracuse. Now, there are a couple of people I'd like to thank right now because this was a very, very lengthy process. You know, I really appreciate the cooperation and discussion of the administration, appreciate the support and guidance we also receive from Nancy Kern-Eaton and the folks over at the United Way in understanding the ALICE calculation. And so with that, let me turn it over to Amory Telosier to start.
Yay! Well, I'm very proud to represent the 11 counties that make up Central New York for the labor movement. I represent all the trades, all the private sector, public sector. We're all on board for this for one reason. We need to live in a community where people can afford to not only feed their family, but to have a job, but to get to the job that they're supposedly making the money to feed their family and pay for their apartment or their home, to be able to educate their children, put clothes on their back. We need a living wage. When this started 20 years ago, the reason we did it was because the old proverb of one rising tide lifts all boats is true. Labor unions, we do negotiate for our membership, but we also negotiate for non-union, because whatever happens within our employers where we are able to get benefits and a higher wage, a living wage, that's all we ever ask for. We don't ask to go beyond what it takes to live in our community. When we negotiate, it becomes the prevailing rate. And then all employers, if they want skilled labor of any sort, and labor to show up every day, they have to pay a living wage. And so why shouldn't the city step forward first, as we are really the center of Central New York, right here in Syracuse. And for that, we back our auditor, and we back the city, and we ask the mayor to come forward and the councilors to back a living wage, because that will help everybody. We need to be able to afford to live in the community. We need to be able to afford the community we live in. It's the old saying, if you make cars, you should be able to afford to buy a car. If you live in Syracuse, you should be able to live in one of the apartments downtown. You should be able to live, to get a car. You should be able to have public transportation. So this is just the beginning of all that for any worker, union or non-union, to be able to live in this community. And with that, I turn it over to my colleague, Mark Spatafora.
Thank you, Amory. I'm going to echo some of Amory's comments. But first, I do want to thank the city auditor for doing this. He has really taken a leadership role in this. His predecessors, one did our actual report. The other one talked to me once about it for a meeting. So I really appreciate the fact that he's taken this as an important issue. And actually reading the audit, the thing that struck me was when and Amory and I were involved in this campaign over 20 some odd years ago, 25 years ago. And one of the things that struck me was at the time, we were saying how poverty was too high back then when it was 20%. And now today, it's closer to 30%. So the issue is still there. And the issue is, and I can appreciate what the mayor was saying in his response, that this is not just with one administration. This has been multiple administrations that never really bought into the fact that in spite of all the economic development projects, all the tax breaks that we have given businesses and developers and what have you, poverty is still a huge issue, not just in the city of Syracuse, but community-wide. And really, if you look at upstate cities, Syracuse is not unique. They all have similar challenges and similar levels of poverty. So what are we going to do as Syracusans to really deal with it? So like Amory was saying, what the living wage ordinance, and we knew that we couldn't do with, say, like Seattle does, or in other states where they allow their cities to set a higher minimum wage. The only way we can do this under the city charter and the state laws is to do it through the procurement process of the city of Syracuse, under the ideas that we should not have our tax dollars subsidizing poverty wages. So in order for us to address that, that's the idea of the living wage ordinance came. But the city never really wanted to do it. They had to be sued. There was a lawsuit that made them enforce them to actually enforce the law. And it's never really been made a priority. So we're calling on not just the mayor and the council, but also all the candidates that are running for office. As you're running for office, how are you going to address the living wage ordinance, and how are you going to address poverty? Because we need to make this a priority, because having poverty in this society, in this country where we have more wealth now than we've ever had, should not be tolerated. Thank you.
Not only would this report not have been possible without the support of Friends of Labor like this, but the living wage ordinance would not have been made possible without Friends and Labor like this. Specifically these Friends and Labor. And I think it is so important to remember that the role that labor had in this law and so many of the other laws and ordinances across the board that make working conditions good. You know, labor brought you the minimum wage. Labor brought you living wage. Labor brought you the prevailing wage. Labor brought you weekends. Labor has brought you so many other important parts of the equation that we need to make sure that we are putting their voices squarely at the table as we talk about the future of this and so many other workplace protections. In my former life, I was a staffer in the state legislature, we passed something known as the New York HERO Act, which helped, during the pandemic, help create new rules for workplaces to prevent the spread of airborne diseases. You know, labor needs to be at the table to keep our workplaces safe. It's so important, and we just need to make sure that everyone is here to make sure that we are using our immense power as a city for procurement to make a difference for everyone. Now with that, any questions?
Can I just say one?
Oh, yes.
I just thought of this. I know what the opposition says, as our auditor was enumerating who supported it. The opposition is going to immediately say, we're going to have to cut jobs, we're going to have to cut services, we can't fix our place up. This is, right, Mark? Because that's exactly what they come forward with. Now, recently, as we all know, we went through a New York State minimum wage increase of 70 cents per year. For what, 5, 6 years? Right? You know who rose to it? All the employers. They came up with ways to meet that new scale and put a little bit of money on top of it. They not only raised the rate in accordance with what the state said, but they also put more. And they kept, and I'm sure your membership too, they kept indexes between the different skills so that the contract looked just how it did before, meaning they had the differences in wages based on your skills, just as they always have. Nobody lost jobs. They still, right, they need more workers now. Nobody lost jobs. So I'm just preparing, because we do have some good employers here. Thankfully, they're union employers. And they take care of any increase. You know, it's just about shaking a little and reevaluating the whole of a company. So with that, I'll turn it back to Adam.
Thank you. With that, any questions? John, we're looking at you.
Well, as far as you've outlined, Alexander, as I understand it, was designed for vendors of the city to, have a standard prevailing wage, right? And that never happened, never got published by the finance committee. So
It did get published. I want to make
Okay.
sure that they do publish it. They publish it on the website. I would like. They do a good job doing exactly what they are supposed to do. I think we could do more to be proactive to other vendors, making sure we are talking to everyone, making sure they know about this. You know, in the administration's response, I give them a lot of credit. They're interested in that. And I look forward to working with them to do some of that. I think that they have this is something that they want to do. I don't want to speak for them, but they have said to me, they send me responses, this is something they're interested in, they want to work on. And I think there's a lot of room of agreement of how we can be more proactive. I just want to make it clear. It's not that they did not publish anything.
Okay.
It's that I would like them to be more proactive about letting folks know. I want them to be shouting it from the rooftops.
So I misread obviously there. Sorry about that. As far as enough companies getting to hear about it, there's zero compliance, right? So you would like to see it enacted and also to city employees, right?
Yes.
Are there city employees that are undervalued, so to speak?
Well, I've been in this office now for over a year. As you know, I've worked in City Hall in another capacity for many years. I love our city employees. Many of them, I've gotten to be very good friends with them. I think that we always need to put an emphasis on the skills and talent we have in our city workforce. We have some of the best people doing incredible work. And every time we are able to invest in the people of the city of Syracuse doing that work, we see a return on that. We need to be an employer of choice in this community. We need to be where people are, rattling the door to get in, apply for the jobs that we have, take those openings. I know a woman who came to the city of Syracuse as a receptionist in the Parks Department, worked her way up to being a commissioner over the years. And that is not a unique story. I've known folks in many different departments who've done that kind of work and had that kind of career trajectory. I've worked with some of our New American organizations to make sure that they're applying for jobs in Syracuse as well. But we need to make sure that when folks come in the door, if folks want to come in the door, and the way we do that is paying folks on with the living wage level. Now, I do not want to say this is a chronic problem. We are talking dozens, maybe hundreds of people, not thousands. I think there are a small handful of some of our employees, just based on what I know we pay a few titles. Some are part-time, many of them are part-time workers who are paid below the living wage level. The living wage law sets one rate if you're offered and accept benefits, one rate if you don't accept benefits. We don't do benefits for our part-time employees, so theoretically I believe they should be paid at that higher level, which is maybe in most cases $1, $1.50 more per hour than they're currently doing. I think that's reasonable. We could probably do that without a massive fiscal impediment on the city, and it's another way to just, give our workers a little extra dignity, give our workers a little extra, keep them coming in the door.
Would that be a little bit more in terms of when you compare it to all of these step increases that the state has taken? Would this be more a higher earning wage than what the state has done to increase the minimum wage?
Yes. So the minimum wage, which is set by New York State, by the way, is different in upstate than it is in New York City. I believe it should be a parity.
Yes, thank
That
you.
needs to happen. We need to have a parity minimum wage across New York State. Just because you live in Syracuse does not mean your work is less valuable than if you live in White Plains. So that's step one. The living wage is higher than the minimum wage. It is one rate if you accept benefits, another rate if you do not accept benefits. We need to make, and yes, that is higher than the minimum wage. I don't think the minimum wage is high enough to begin with. This makes sure that we are paying people at least closer to what they deserve for their work, for their time, so they can live safely, stay out of poverty, and be able to, as Anne Marie said, live in this community. We have seen some of the highest rent increases in the country. We've seen the cost of living go up. Everyone feels it at the grocery store every day. Tax dollars from the city of Syracuse should not be subsidizing people who cannot afford to live here. Our dollars should go toward
Are there certain positions that city workers have that are covered under the union, like city DPW department or something, versus if you work in other departments you might not be covered under a union?
We have a majority, correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, but a majority of our employees are union employees. The number of employees we have that are non-union is proportional to our headcount, relatively small. Most
all the wages in that industry go up, because that's what they need to pay, as I said. You want a worker to show up every day and care about their job, you gotta pay them a living wage. Because they can't go to work worrying about, it's almost the 30th and I need the cash for my rent, or the babysitter. I need to pay in cash and I need the cash, you know? So, it's all about creating a community that really will make business thrive. As usual, here we go again, you know, we're always looking out for business. But that's what taking care of the workers does. It makes the whole community rise up, and it should be, again, why shouldn't you be able to afford to live in one of these downtown apartments? Right?
Yeah, that's,
What's the next?
And I would just add to that. When we invest in the people who work either directly for the city or work for our vendors, many of those folks live here in the city, that grows the revenue that we can bring into the city. Because that means folks are putting their money into the economy. We get sales tax revenue. That means people may become first-time homeowners. They may be paying property taxes that keep all of this up and running behind us. So when we put that money into workers' pockets, it goes into the economy and makes a difference for us.
What's the next step as far as maybe urging the current administration to move forward with this?
Well, I would love to see folks make their appointments to the Living Wage Advisory Committee. Let's bring that back. Council could do that immediately. Put that on their agenda next week. I think that's a good first step. That's an easy step. And let's start having a conversation with those folks about the changes we need to make. My audit lays out kind of an outline of what those changes can be, how to better impact those. Let's keep that going. Let's start that conversation and get some legislation up before the council so that they can vote on the necessary reforms to this so we can get the work done and make sure that this is up and running smoothly.
How much are the rates, if you compare it to the state minimum wage? You say it's a little bit more?
Yes. So with benefits, if you accept benefits, the rate is $16.41 an hour, and without benefits, it is $19.37 an